Hi, greetings. Welcome to another Cornerstone Media training video. This video is going to go over some of the less commonly used buttons on a channel, so let's take a look. So in the last video I talked about levels a little bit. This video I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the buttons on the channel as far as what they are and what they do. Starting at the top of the board again, we have 4 buttons you'll see. We have a 48V, a line, this little L that fell over, and a phi or a 0 with a line through its symbol. 48V, when you push this button, there's going to be a light that'll go on above it. You'll see that is called phantom power. That'll feed 48 DC volts down that line on the balanced line input. So it'll feed it down. That's intended for condenser microphones. Some direct boxes will use it, but it's effectively acting as power to that device. The next thing here is line. That selects which of the 2 inputs on the back of the board you're pulling from. So line is the balanced line input. When it's down, it's the unbalanced line, typically just 2-ring 1/4-inch cord, and when it's up, it means it's pulling from the balanced line input, or sometimes called a mic cable XLR, kind of a cable connector in the back. This next button here is the low cut or high pass, depending on which one you want to use. They're called both. As you can see right underneath, it's saying 100 hertz. So basically what that's saying, it says a hard decibel pull down at 100 hertz and below. The reason for that is a lot of instrumentation doesn't actually need that 100 hertz. So people handling microphones, people singing, human voice doesn't really produce 100 hertz and lower successfully. And so a lot of that just ends up being mic handling sounds, rumbling noises. You can hear it a lot in post-production stuff and live stuff. You don't hear it too cleanly, but it does come through as just people moving around up on the stage, especially if the mic is just left in the stand. This final one is a phase reversal. Not used very often in live application, a lot of studio application, but it takes the same signal and it reverses the phase of it. You don't necessarily hear this unless you're having a phasing issue. So moving on down, we have this little blue button, on off. As you'll see, some of these have indicators as far as what is on and what is off. You'll also notice on the edge of them, they're 2-colored, even up here. So if it's up, you can kind of see an under white belly of the button. If it's down, you can't really see that. So that's kind of a quick reference to see if it's up or down. Basically that just turns the EQ on or off for that channel. So obviously down it's enabled and up it is not. These buttons here, more of the same up-down options. What this does is you'll notice also that each one of these 8 auxiliary sends are paired up color-wise. So you have a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. That's for stereo mixing those together. If you were using in your monitors, maybe you'd want to go, instead of from 8 independent mixes of mono, you could go to 4 stereo mixes. So you'd still have, for example, 1 and 2 would be a mix. There'd be 1 mix, but with this down, what that does is it changes the roles of these 2 knobs. So at present, if it's mono, if it's up, that means that both of these knobs are just acting as level selects for those 2 channels. So channel 1 and channel 2 are each can be set to 2 different levels. If I put this down, the roles change. So now 1, this knob, is acting as the level for both of these sends. So the output of those 2 sends is at this overall level, but what happens is the second knob becomes a panning select. So 1 becomes the left channel at the back of the board, and 2 becomes the right channel. So I can fade this left or fade this right. So you have channel 1 as the left, channel 2 as the right. If I pan this to the right, I effectively turn off channel 1 and vice versa, turn off channel 2 because I'm selecting the left only, selecting the right only. So that button does, we don't use it in that fashion. So for the most part, that button should be up. If it is down, you're going to experience some unique problems. This button here is a pre-post button. So what that does is it sets the button to be pre-fader set or post-fader set. So if it's down, it's going to select, it's going to send the level to these outputs according to what the level was set at up here. If it's up, it's going to set the output of these two dependent on where this fader is at. So for example, in this case, if it was set to post fader up in the up position, it would take only the signal that's coming from this channel when the fader's all up. This would be off for both of those, then it would turn up. So this acts as an overall master volume knob for the send of these two. The reason why you would do this, for example, it's set that way for this channel because this is a channel where we use all of our production audio, so our pre and post service music, where it sends it to the stage monitors, but if I fade it out when service starts, or I fade it up as it ends, the team can hear it dependent on this fader. So at the end of the beginning of the service, they hear it fade down. Nobody hears anything. At the end of the service, they hear it fade up. They know it's playing. On the contrary, it's down for most of the worship team. So down means that even if I set the fader for the channel, let's say I start the mix at Unity, and Sally is singing her song, and all of a sudden she gets really quiet, and I push it up. Well, if this was set dependent on the post fader level, then that would mean that her monitor mix would have just gotten louder of herself, right? She would have gotten more of it, as opposed to, or everyone using that monitor. Or if she got loud, I'd pull it down, and then it would go down in her monitor mix. Now, presumably I'm adjusting it for her performance, so it follows, but it might not follow directly or cleanly, and so you don't want to let the stage hear the result of your mixing. You want them to hear the result of their performance. So that's why in most of the channels that button is down. All of that holds true for each of the other three groups of the color groupings. The next knob down is the pan, left and right. For the most part, the house mix is mono. Both sides there's no stereo separation. If that was desired, it's an option. Here again, we have the mute groups. The mute groups are a mute option. So if we push this button, this turns the whole channel off, right? So the whole channel goes off, but maybe we don't want to, as you can see, there's a couple of channels to manage here. So maybe you don't want to have to worry about remembering to mute all of the team all at once and go across every single one of these and hit it. What you can do is you can use a selected mute group, and you can say this channel 24 is in mute group 1. What I often do is I'll put like the singers together and the instruments together, and I'll cluster them up that way, and I'll say, okay, when a certain section of the performance happens, I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to hit this mute group master button, mute group masters, which is in the master section. If I fade back a little bit, you can see to the left there, this is the center section for all the master faders. So if I hit this mute group button over here, if this is selected, so if I hit this, as you can see, it's not grouped. Nothing's happening to that channel. But if I go ahead and select the group, when I hit that one, now you can see as I hit it over here, it's grouping. And if I unmute these couple, you can see the benefit of that is you can do multiple at once. So it's good for production management as far as keeping track of what channels are being monitored or shut off and on at the same time. You don't have to worry about, oh, I missed that microphone or that channel. And finally, we have, these are group assignments. If I fade back out to this master section here, these are the groups. We have 8 of them. It's a very good board. The benefit of groups is that you have 8 independent sends or that you can manage. The pan fader becomes a group, becomes part of the group select matrix. So if I pan left and I select group 1, then I am only sending to group 1 as opposed to group 1 and 2. If I'm panned center, then I'm sending to both 1 and 2. And if I'm panned right, then I'm sending to just 2. So I have the option of sending discretely or in stereo combination. And again, going back to the stereo matrixing, the pan knob, you can use these groups in pairs. So group 1 and 2 end up being a left-right pair, 3 and 4, etc., depending on how you're grouping this. What that means is you have 8 discretes or 4 stereos. Again, the option is up to you. For the most part, in a mono house mix, we're only sending it to 1. So if you do decide to do a mute group, only 1, then you would pan hard left, you would select the pairing, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, etc., and then you would take it out of the main mix. This last button, this is a trick. This button sends this fader to the main mix of the board, the output. If this button is up, it's not sending to the main mix, and that means you won't hear it in the house unless you go through the group. Each one of the groups, as you can see, also has a main mix select. So if you wanted, for example, to use that to manage a grouping of singers or instruments, you'd want to use that accordingly. And again, you might wonder what's the purpose of having a main mix select on both? What if I send it to send one channel to both places at the same time? Well, then it gets louder and you have to run into feedback issues. Why do I have the option of accidentally not sending this mix to the house or the main mix? Well, because this is a professional soundboard and you have the option to send this however you want to manage those inputs and outputs, and it's going to vary. So those are the buttons, kind of an overview of what they are. Not as brief as I might have liked, but if you follow along, if you listen back, if you need to go over it again, you have the option of having a good understanding of what all of these buttons do and how you would use them.